Stop. Don't scroll. What you're about to hear happened at 30,000 feet, and it left an entire airplane in tears. The baby was screaming. Not whining. Not fussing. Screaming like nothing could calm him down. Passengers were frustrated. The mother was breaking down. The tension in that cabin was unbearable. Then, without warning, something changed. No announcement. No flight attendant. No adult stepped in. It was a child. A young black boy. Sitting quietly. Did something so small, yet so powerful, that it stopped the crying cold. The noise disappeared. The plane went silent. And strangers who were annoyed just moments earlier found themselves wiping tears from their eyes. This isn't just a story about a baby on a plane. It's about kindness. It's about humanity. And it's about how the smallest act, done at the right moment, can change everything. Stay with me, because you won't forget what happened next. The baby started crying before the plane even finished boarding. Not a soft whimper. Not a short fuss. This was the kind of crying that drills straight into your head and refuses to let go. It echoed through the narrow cabin, bouncing off the overhead bins and seat backs like it had nowhere to escape. Heads turned instantly. A few passengers flinched. Someone near the window closed their eyes, as if bracing for impact. This wasn't just noise. It was distress, raw and unstoppable. Passengers exchanged tired looks, the kind that silently ask, "How long is this flight again?" A man in a business suit shoved his headphones on and turned up the volume. A woman across the aisle sighed loudly, shaking her head. Another passenger scrolled through their phone with visible frustration. Up front, the baby's mother tried everything she knew. She bounced him gently, then faster. She rocked him back and forth, whispering soothing words only a parent knows. She checked his blanket, adjusted his tiny socks, and softly apologized over and over again to the people around her. "I'm so sorry. I don't know what's wrong," she said, her voice trembling. Nothing worked. As the plane taxied down the runway, the crying only grew louder, desperate, sharp, relentless. Each minute stretched painfully long. 10 minutes felt like 30. 30 felt like an hour. The cabin felt smaller, tighter. The air itself seemed heavy, filled with tension and impatience. People checked their watches. Someone muttered under their breath, "This is going to be a long flight." Another passenger leaned toward their companion and whispered something that made them both shake their heads. The mother's eyes filled with tears, her face flushed with embarrassment. She avoided looking at anyone, afraid of the judgment she felt pressing in from every direction. Her shoulders slumped as exhaustion finally caught up with her. Still, she kept trying, because that's what mothers do. She held the baby close, gently patting his back, silently begging him to calm down. Then, just when it felt like the chaos would never end, something unexpected happened. From 3 rows back, a soft, steady sound cut through the noise. It wasn't loud. It wasn't demanding. Not a voice. Not words. Just a gentle hum, floating quietly through the cabin, like a calm breeze in the middle of a storm. The sound came from a black boy who couldn't have been more than 10 years old. He sat quietly beside his grandmother, tucked into the middle seat, his small backpack resting at his feet. His legs dangled above the floor, swinging slightly with the gentle vibration of the plane. While everyone else looked tense and irritated, his face was calm, focused, almost thoughtful. He wasn't holding a phone. He wasn't watching a screen. He was simply present. He wasn't looking for attention. He wasn't trying to be noticed. He just hummed. At first, no one realized where the sound was coming from. It blended so naturally into the background that it felt like part of the plane itself. The hum was low and warm, steady and comforting, almost like a lullaby without lyrics. It carried a softness that felt familiar, like something remembered from childhood. The baby's cries didn't stop right away, but they changed. The sharp, piercing screams slowly softened. The desperate wails turned into confused whimpers, as if the baby was trying to understand what he was hearing. His crying began to rise and fall, no longer frantic, no longer out of control. The boy kept humming. He didn't rush. He didn't grow nervous. He hummed like he had all the time in the world. His grandmother noticed a shift in the cabin before she noticed him. She looked around, confused by the sudden change in energy. Then she turned toward her grandson, eyes widening slightly as she realized the sound was coming from him. She leaned over and whispered softly, careful not to break the moment. "Baby, what are you doing?" The boy shrugged gently, never breaking his rhythm. His voice was quiet when he answered, almost shy. "It's the song my mom used to hum to me," he said. "It always helped me sleep." There was something powerful in the simplicity of his words. The baby paused. For the first time in what felt like forever, there was no crying, no whimpering, no screams slicing through the air. Just the steady hum, floating gently through the cabin. The baby's chest rose and fell. His tiny hands relaxed. His eyes stopped darting around and slowly settled in the direction of the sound. Then silence. A silence so sudden and complete that it felt unreal, like the calm after a storm no one expected to end. For the first time since boarding, the airplane was quiet. Not the normal kind of quiet filled with engine noise and restless movement, but a deep, unexpected stillness. It felt as if the entire cabin was holding its breath. The sharp tension that had filled the air moments earlier slowly dissolved, replaced by a calm no one had planned for. The baby blinked, his tiny chest rising and falling in a slow, steady rhythm. His eyes were wide open, locked in the direction of the sound. No crying, no fussing, just listening. The boy never stopped humming. He didn't smile or look around to see who was watching. He didn't wave or acknowledge the sudden attention. He simply kept going, calm and consistent, as if this moment existed only between him and the baby. Passengers began to notice. Slowly, carefully, people turned in their seats. A man removed one earphone and let it dangle from his hand. A woman leaned into the aisle, her irritation replaced with curiosity. Someone whispered, almost afraid to break the spell, "Is the baby asleep?" The baby's mother froze. She didn't move. She didn't breathe. She barely blinked. Fear and hope mixed in her chest as she waited, terrified that even the smallest movement might shatter the fragile peace. Her arms tightened just slightly around her child. Then it happened. The baby's head tilted gently and rested against her shoulder. His eyes fluttered once, twice, then slowly closed. His fingers, which had been clenched tight for so long, finally relaxed. His body softened completely. He was asleep. The moment felt unreal. The mother raised one hand to her mouth, tears spilling freely down her cheeks. Relief washed over her in waves, relief so strong her knees felt weak. She turned her head carefully toward the boy, her voice barely more than a breath. "Thank you," she whispered. The boy glanced up briefly and nodded politely, as if he hadn't done anything extraordinary. He kept humming for another minute, steady and gentle, just to be sure the baby stayed asleep. The sound wrapped around the cabin like a protective blanket. No one spoke. No one moved. Only when the baby was fully, peacefully asleep did the boy finally stop. And even then, the quiet remained, as if everyone was afraid to disturb the miracle they had just witnessed. The flight attendant approached quietly, careful not to disturb the sleeping baby. She moved slowly down the aisle and knelt beside the boy, lowering herself to his eye level. Her voice was soft, but filled with emotion. "That was beautiful," she said. "You saved the whole plane." A ripple of warmth spread through the cabin. People smiled at one another, some for the first time since boarding. A few passengers brought their hands together in gentle, respectful applause. Others wiped their eyes, surprised by how deeply the moment had touched them. What had started as irritation had turned into something far more meaningful. The boy shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable with all the attention. His cheeks flushed slightly. He glanced at his grandmother, then back at the flight attendant. "I didn't do it for them," he said honestly. "I did it for the baby." His words landed softly but powerfully. His grandmother placed a warm hand on his shoulder, pride shining in her eyes. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Her smile said everything. The rest of the flight felt different after that. Lighter, calmer, as if the air itself had changed. Passengers who had been strangers just moments ago began to talk quietly with one another. A man leaned over the seat and offered the boy a snack he'd brought from home. A woman across the aisle smiled and said, "That was the sweetest thing I've ever seen." Another passenger nodded and added, "Young man, never stop being who you are." The boy smiled shyly and looked down at his hands. But what really changed wasn't the noise level. The engines still hummed. The seatbelts still clicked. The plane still moved through the sky, just as it had before. What changed was the mood. The frustration, the impatience, the quiet judgments, they were gone. In their place was connection, compassion, a shared sense of humanity. For a brief moment, everyone on that plane was reminded that kindness doesn't have to be loud or dramatic to be powerful. All it takes is one small act, one gentle choice. And on that flight, a child chose kindness instead of silence, and it changed everything. When the plane finally landed and rolled slowly toward the gate, the cabin buzzed softly with movement. Seatbelts clicked open. Bags were pulled from overhead bins. But the mother stayed seated, waiting patiently near the aisle, her sleeping baby still cradled against her chest. She watched carefully as passengers began to file past. When the boy stood up and stepped into the aisle with his grandmother, the mother gently reached out and touched his arm. Her eyes were still glossy, her expression filled with gratitude that words could barely capture. "I'll never forget what you did," she said quietly. "You don't know how much that meant to me." The boy looked up at her and smiled shyly, almost embarrassed by the praise. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other before replying in a soft voice, "My mom says everyone needs comfort sometimes." His words lingered in the air. That's when it hit everyone nearby. This wasn't just a sweet moment. It was a lesson, a reminder, something far bigger than a crying baby on a plane. In a world that often judges too quickly, assumes too much, and listens too little, a child had reminded a plane full of adults what humanity sounds like. Not through speeches, not through arguments, but through a simple act of care. Passengers overheard the exchange and smiled. Some nodded quietly, as if acknowledging something they didn't realize they'd forgotten. Others walked off the plane deep in thought, carrying the moment with them. The boy and his grandmother disappeared into the crowd, unaware of how many hearts they had touched. There were no cameras, no headlines, just a memory shared by a group of strangers who would likely never meet again. But they would remember the feeling. Not loud, not demanding, just a soft hum, offered with love. And maybe that was the point. So the next time life feels overwhelming, when the noise is too loud, the stress too heavy, and patience too thin, remember this story. Remember that kindness doesn't need permission, and comfort doesn't require words. Sometimes, the smallest voices carry the greatest power. That flight ended like any other. People grabbed their bags and went their separate ways. But no one left the same, because in the middle of chaos, a child reminded a plane full of adults what compassion sounds like. Not loud, not demanding, just gentle, just real. So if life feels noisy, if the world feels overwhelming, remember this moment. Sometimes, the smallest voices carry the greatest power. If this story touched your heart, like, subscribe, and share it, because the world could use more kindness like this. Red Heart.